Welcome back to Pursuing Justice. We are speaking with our guest, Jim McCloskey, and he's been our guest these last 2 weeks, sharing his lifelong commitment to wrongful incarceration. The measure of his success is Centurion Ministries, an organization he created in 1983 to help those wrongly accused of crimes who are serving time in prison. What always strikes me about a wrongful incarceration is that while an innocent person is locked up, someone who is guilty is free to commit the same crimes all over again. So, Jim, I do want to discuss how that happens, this phenomenon, as I call it, is when a person is convicted and sent to prison, the factors that are part of that. But before we get into that, and we also are going to talk a little bit about your book, we finished the last podcast. We were kind of midway, I guess, about a case that you were very involved in. So if you would recap that for us, that would be really great.
Okay. In Conroe, Texas, in 1980, a lovely young high school student who was the manager of a volleyball team visiting Conroe High School a week before school was to start in late August of 1980. She wandered the large high school and looking for a restroom and disappeared. What happened was, when she came upon 3 janitors who were waiting for their supervisor, who was the only African-American in the group, or the only African-American janitor was the supervisor, Clarence Brantley. He wasn't there when she arrived when she encountered these three other janitors. So she asked for a restroom, and what happened was 2 of the 3 janitors grabbed her impulsively and dragged her into the restroom, sexually assaulted her, strangled her to death, and buried her body in the auditorium of the high school just across the way. Anyway, the witness, where we left it last time was that in the course of my investigation on that had its ups and downs, by March 17th, 1987, that's St. Patty's Day. I'll never forget that St. Patty's Day of that year, because we, the defense team, and we were able to convince the third janitor who had testified falsely against Clarence in his trial to recant his testimony. Not only did he recant and admit that he lied, but he was an eyewitness to the crime, as these 2 other janitors, to his shock, grabbed the girl and took her into the restroom and did what they did to her. And meantime, while they're doing that, she's screaming for help, and he, much to his own dismay, as he told us, I guess I had a little bit of rabbit in me, and he ran away from her screams for help. Anyway, we find him. We develop a relationship with him. He starts telling this story in bits and pieces. And finally, on St. Patty's Day, he told the whole sordid story of who did what to her as he observed this. And so he realized by recanting that 2 things are going to happen. He is going to come clean. For all these years, he's having nightmares because he let an innocent girl go to her death without trying to help or save her. And on top of that, he sent an innocent man to death row who's going to be executed in 9 days.
Oh.
He gave us a statement. Now, since 60 Minutes, Patty Hassler, the producer, she was just starting a story on the work of Centurion. But then we bring John Henry Sessom, the recanting eyewitness on the Brantley case, forward. She switches over, which was great. So instead of doing a story on McCloskey, she did a story on the Clarence Brantley case. And she and I convinced John, the recanting witness, John Sessom. It's one thing to tell attorneys and to give a videotape, but it's another thing to to admit to the world that you allowed an innocent girl to go to her death and you put an innocent man on prison. To admit that. But he did. And he and I talked about how Cheryl Ferguson, the victim, and God are looking down on him, and he can redeem Clarence, but at the same time redeem himself by coming forward and telling the truth, which is what he did. 60 minutes ran this story. With that, all hell broke loose as far as the prosecution's case. It just fell completely apart. We had a major evidence. We got a change of venue. We got out of Conroe. We got a new judge. The whole bench was recused. We got a visiting judge from West Texas. We had we switched the evidentiary hearing to Galveston, Texas. We brought 43 witnesses forward. Long story short, at the conclusion of the evidentiary hearing, the Judge Pickett, a great man, said, I have never seen such a case of witness intimidation, racial prejudice, misconduct by law enforcement people who lost sight of what their responsibilities are. And I'm recommending that Mr. Brantley get a new trial. Now, that decision formally came down in November of '87. But Clarence was still on death row because the district attorney refused to admit that they made a mistake. They appealed the judge's decision and fought us tooth and nail until finally the high court in Texas confirmed the judge's decision and instated and vacated the conviction. The U.S. Supreme Court, to whom the DA appealed, refused to hear it. And finally, on January 23rd, 1990, some year and a half, 2 years after that evidentiary hearing, we walked Clarence Brantley free off of death row and brought him home, an exonerated man.
What a story. Why is it? Because as a board member, former board member of Innocence Project of Florida, I would hear our executive director say this all the time. Why the fight and the pushback from the people who, had the case in the first place, the prosecution? Why such a fight to prevent an innocent man from, going to his death?
Well, not only that, and I'll get into that, but I also want to point out, and we have a number of cases that demonstrate this point. Not only that, we know who the real killers are, the two janitors. And the judge said that in his opinion. And yet, they took one of those two janitors, they took both janitors under their wing and tried to protect them from these, this what they claim to be false evidence against them, which wasn't false at all. But why did he do that?
Yeah, why?
First of all, the trial prosecutor of Clarence Brantley was the elected DA at the time. And by the time of the evidentiary hearing, he was the presiding judge of that county, Montgomery County, where Conroe was. So his successor as district attorney, who was also part of the office, but not part of the original Brantley prosecution, wanted to protect his predecessor, who's now the most influential judge in that county. So they fought us tooth and nail to protect him and his reputation and their office's reputation, that they put an innocent man on death row who came within, as it turned out, 6 days from execution.
That's right.
Not only that, but, they just, district attorneys so often, not all the time, we have a number of exceptions.
Yeah.
They refuse to admit that they are wrong.
They made a mistake. Right.
They made a mistake. They hardly ever do they apologize, even when they're exonerated. You don't get a formal apology from the powers to be. And also, another factor, I guess, It's tough for me to put myself in their minds because I don't understand it really myself. They're afraid of civil suits and, the county getting hit up for millions of dollars for wrongful prosecution.
Yeah, that could be.
Now, here's another thing, Harry. Here's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we have a number of cases that demonstrate this, and the Clarence Brantley is one of them. Not only do they fight you tooth and nail, but they let the real killers go, and they use the real killers as the star witnesses against the innocent defendant.
Oh, no.
And that happened in the Brantley case. I talked about Sessom and the recantation, but one of the two killers, the name is Gary Akerman. I'm not bashful about that. It's public knowledge. Gary Akerman was one of the janitors who testified against Clarence Brantley at his trial.
Remarkable. Absolutely. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, that's what infuriates. That's what infuriates me when you see, and we have freed over the years, over the last 40 years, we have been fortunate enough with a lot of good people working, both our staff, our volunteers, our outside forensic experts, Paul Castellero, the lead lawyer, as well as other attorneys across the country. We've been able to free 64 innocent people, all of whom were serving life or death sentences for the crimes of others, who collectively have spent 1,350 years in prison for somebody else's crime.
That is a number that you really have to reckon with. It's hard to imagine that you're talking in numbers that large, and we know it's true. We know it's true. I mean, if you look at the whole country, I think right now there must be way over 2,500 people across the nation since we've been keeping records.
Yeah, the National Registry of Exonerations, they have documented all the exonerations in America that have taken place since 1989.
That's right. And that's not that far back.
It's well over 2,600, but that's just the surface. There's many more men and women who have been exonerated, and maybe the registry, they don't know about them, or a lot of thousands of people. In my view, thousands of people are buried in prison for the crimes of others whose cases have not seen the light of day. If they are, they're still being litigated throughout the courts of America.
That's right. Yeah. How I had asked you this before, and we'll swing back to it. How many requests do you get in the space of a year? Right.
We document every one because we respond to everyone. Since 1992, going back to when Kate first joined me, and then let's say 1990, we were getting like 500 requests for help. Barry Scheck started his operation in 92. In 1992, Barry just started out. We've been in business for 12 years. And from that point on, we get anywhere from 1,100 to 1,500 new requests for help from people we never heard of before. So the letters just pour in to the offices of Centurion. And, over the years, we've developed a system for vetting the cases and doing our best to select those that have the best merit to them and deserve our attention. It's a tough decision to make at times because, in a way, you're playing God. Which cases are you going to start? But anyway, we have at any given time we have 20 volunteers, most of whom are adults in the community from various walks of life.